Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back for another cook video. This is the first official cook video of the new year. I know it's been a while since I've done a full-length video. With Christmas and New Year's and it being a really busy holiday season, I just didn't have the time to make the videos I wanted. But with the start of this new year, I definitely wanted to get back into it. And what we're going to be making today is a Carolina-style pulled pork. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to go to Carolina and have that experience for myself personally. The very first time I cooked a hog was with Elliot Moss. We had a fundraiser going on at Truth and he was one of our guest chefs that came, and it was just super awesome to be able to cook with someone like him as he kind of showed me the ropes of how to scoop coals and what to look for in the hog.
So this is like the stuff we make the stock with. This right here, that goes in the hash. See the little silver skins kind of stuff, like, but that renders out and it's good in the hash. Nah, that's good. How soft that is. That's some good stuff there. This is on the verge of bacon, like that one is.
And then after I left Houston, I worked at Leroy and Lewis, and they cook a hog every week. So I was able to take my experience with cooking my one hog with Elliot Moss and then kind of extending it there. And probably one of the things I get most excited about when going to different festivals, especially Windy City, is Sam Jones's team coming to Windy City and being able to get a hog sandwich from there. Right now, I don't have the capacity to, cook a whole hog. I don't have a cinder block pit. And I don't have a burn barrel in my backyard. Maybe we'll do that someday. But yeah, today what I wanted to do is be able to show you guys how you can possibly get something similar to that style of barbecue, but doing your own backyard. And to make this cook as compatible to everyone as possible, we're gonna be cooking this on our SNS. But as always, we're gonna start our fires with Fogo charcoal. Now let's get into the prep of our pulled pork. The prep for the pulled pork is probably the easiest thing in barbecue. I'll usually take a look at that pork shoulder and see if there's any, things that are hanging off, and I'll trim those off. I don't want to trim off that fat. I know some people like to because they think that it helps kind of create some bark on top of there. But I think it's kind of nice to get that fat kind of charred up a little bit to add a little bit different texture when you do shred everything up. And the fat layer on top is pretty thin, so it's not really a layer of fat that's going to prevent you from getting seasoning going through the inside. After I looked at the pork shoulder, there wasn't really anything that I needed to trim off, so we're just simply gonna season this thing with salt and pepper. I did a 50-50 of 16 mesh black pepper and kosher salt, and I made sure I covered this thing as much as I possibly could. With a cut like this, if you feel like you do need a binder, definitely put something on there. This pork shoulder is pretty tacky when I pull this out of the packet, so there was kind of no need for it, but feel free to do whatever you like in this situation. And this being a Carolina style, I know usually people just put salt on there. In a traditional whole hog, you're getting a lot of texture from different cuts of meat, and some parts being a little more charred than others. But since we're only cooking a single pork butt that has kind of the same texture all the way through, we're not gonna really be able to get as much texture out of there. So in an untraditional sense, I'm seasoning this a lot with black pepper because I wanna be able to get as much texture on the outside as possible so that when we mix it all together, we can replicate that sort of mix of textures from different parts of the animal all together. So I just want to make that clear for everyone who might get upset that I'm using black pepper on a Carolina style hog. But we're trying to figure out ways to replicate that same style, but what we can do with just working in our backyard. In terms of placement, I'm just gonna go with the rule of, finding where that blade bone is and having that blade bone be facing that fire. Two reasons why I want to do that. First reason is I don't want that side that's closest to actual flames to just be all meat. That way we have a little bit more wiggle room if the fire does get a little bit too hot, that like one entire side of our pork butt isn't just exposed to heat and just dries out. The second reason why I want to place in a certain way is that money muscle that you guys see on that side of the pork butt. Usually in competition style, you'll see a lot of guys kind of trim that out. I want to protect that side as well and make sure that's not close to the fire because I don't want that to dry out. Once we get this set up, we're just gonna close the lid and just maintain for a really long time. And the temp that I'm looking for this is gonna be on the hotter end. It's very forgiving, it has a lot of fat. We just don't wanna char it up early and have it be dry. So the temp that I'm aiming for is anywhere between 275 and like 315. I want to keep it pretty hot because I want to build as much texture as I can with a higher heat without charring the outside. And also, it's just gonna help it cook a lot faster. You can keep the temp really, really low, but with a piece like this, it will take quite a while. So after about 7 hours or so, this is what our pork butt is looking like. It's super crusty, it has great bark on the outside. You can start to see the meat pulling back from that bone a little bit. And I just want you to listen to the crustiness of this bark and also the tenderness of this pork. That's what we're looking for when we got pulled pork. And you may be asking, how do I know it's time to kind of check on it? I'm waiting for the pork butt to hit about 165 to 170 or so. Other people usually say too that they're waiting for that fat to split as well. Around 165 and 170 is kind of usually when that happens, as long as you're maintaining that consistent temperature. The one thing that I would just be cautious of is sometimes if you do have heat spikes in your cook, sometimes that fat can split a little bit too early. And if you feel like it happens a little bit too early, I would just kind of do a quick temp check on there just to make sure it's not at like 135 or 140 or something like that, where it's really too low, because you do want to get it to a high enough point when you're ready to wrap. But in my opinion, the best way to wrap a pulled pork like this is to use a foil method. You take 2 sheets of foil and you're crimping around the piece of meat itself, where you can expose the top, where that part is still exposed to kind of like the open air. As that continues to build texture on top, everything underneath is kind of wrapped up, it's able to kind of catch all the juices at the bottom, and is slowly kind of steaming itself. So you get the nice texture on top with the softness in the bottom. So once you get this wrapped up, you're gonna put it back on the smoker and you're gonna maintain the same temp, and you're gonna wait until we read an internal about 202 to 203. Even though I think that pulled pork is one of those cuts that's really hard to mess up, what you can do to mess it up is by pulling the pulled pork out too late. I feel like once you get to your pulling your pork butt around like that 210-ish temp, sometimes the pork, when you're trying to pull it apart, sometimes starts to shred almost like canned tuna. The texture is a little bit gritty. Even though the flavor might be there, the grittiness of that pork is kind of unpleasant. So once it hits that 202 to 203 temp, it's gonna pull it out, let it cool down for about an hour to an hour and a half or so, and I'm gonna let it rest overnight in my oven that's set at about 140 or so. If you guys don't have a warmer or an oven that goes that low, I'm gonna leave a link in the top corner of me talking about different ways that you can, hold your meat overnight and have it be perfectly fine by the time you get to serving it the next day. As that pork rests, we're gonna be working on our vinegar sauce. The vinegar sauce, similar to the pulled pork, is super simple. While I was looking online, there are some variations of this vinegar sauce, but I wanted to pick one that was pretty much something that almost every single one of these sauces had. Going in, we're gonna add some apple cider vinegar. There are also recipes that do apple cider vinegar and white distilled vinegar. I didn't have distilled white vinegar, so I just double up on the apple cider. So after that, we're adding our 3 heat components. We're gonna add a good amount of black pepper, crushed red peppers, and cayenne. And now after that, we're gonna add in some sugar. The sugar that we add in the sauce is not to make it a sweet sauce. It's really to add balance to the sauce because we have all this vinegar. And lastly, just taste it and add in some salt in there just to kind of balance everything out. Again, kind of similar you did with the sugar, but at the very end, you wanna add in a little bit of salt just to kind of bump everything up a bit. This sauce is best made the day before or 2 days before. The slaw also is a very, very simple slaw. And as I was thinking about this recipe, I was like, oh man, I don't know if I have a food processor to kind of shred all this cabbage. But I went down to our basement and found an old food processor that I've seen my grandma use a lot. And I got really excited, but then, yeah, I found out that it was broken. As soon as I tried to turn that thing on, and then I was seeing if all the buttons worked, and that off button just popped off. So then I had to go into the kitchen and found my mom's really small food processor that she uses for like ginger and garlic. And I will say, trying to cut all that cabbage and to shred it up and to put it in that small food processor was absolutely horrible. And it took me way longer than I wanted to take, but that's all I had. So with that being said, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends so I can afford a new food processor. Anyway, back to the slaw. Now that we got our slaw all chopped up, we're gonna put in some mayo, sugar, and that yellow mustard. And we're gonna mix this up and let it rest overnight. All right, so now we've come to the end. We've cooked our pork, we got our vinegar sauce, we got our slaw. And I want you guys to take a look at that pork as it's rested overnight. It doesn't look significantly different than it did when we wrapped it up, but that's because we got so much good color and some good texture on there at that time. And now what we're really doing is allowing that foil boat to really make the meat, all that stuff that's underneath, super tender. So as we get ready to prep this pork, we gotta do the thing that everyone does, is we gotta pull out that bone and show everyone how clean that bone is. As we shred this pork up, you can see that we still have that texture from that fat layer on top. And as you kind of like rip it apart and we mix it in with all that pork, we can see the specks of the bark on the outside mixing with the meat on the inside. And that's what we're looking for. That's why we put all that heavy seasoning on the outside in the first place, because we knew at the end, this is what we wanted in our end product. Next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add our vinegar sauce to our pork. If we wanna keep this entire mound of pulled pork warm throughout, it's best to kind of warm the sauce just a little bit, because if we do that and your sauce is a little bit too cold and you pour the pulled pork, sometimes that intermuscular fat starts to get a little bit white and a little bit slick, and it's not a great texture. I think you can over sauce the pork a little bit, and then it can be a little bit too vinegary in my opinion. Something that you could do if that happens is sprinkle a little bit of salt on top of the pork itself to kind of bump up that pork flavor with the extra vinegar. Pro tip to mixing this pork also, as you're mixing it, try not to like smear it around. You want to like toss it and get some air underneath it. That's something that Elliot Moss told me the very first time we were picking the hog that I cooked with him. As we are pouring our sauce on top of this, you want to get some air underneath it and to kind of flip it so that it kind of gets fluffy.
There, just kind of turning it all, but now we're not really like mushing it up too much. We kind of come from the bottom and come up and like get some air in there. Yeah.
So like I said, guys, this is one of my favorite barbecue items. Like, I love brisket. Beef ribs are great, but I can't eat a lot of it. This in itself, like as a sandwich, this thing I feel like I could eat a lot of. And just to show you guys how much I enjoyed it, usually after I take my bite and do all my explanation, whatever, I usually shut off the camera and leave. But I was really hungry, so I just stood there in front of the camera and ate the entire sandwich before I realized the camera was rolling the entire time. Is this sandwich better than whole hog sandwiches that I've had from Elliot Moss, Sam Jones, or Leroy and Lewis? No, it's not. But I think it's just because you're not able to get the same flavor from the different cuts of meat mixed into one sandwich. And also, I think getting that same flavor that you get from a burn barrel and getting all these coals from there and putting that underneath the hog is much different than having, you know, an offset fire. Even though you're burning mostly coals there, that flavor is just different when you're not getting that fat that's dripping on top of the fire and then giving some more smoke and more flavor that way. But is this one of my favorite sandwiches that I've had? Yes. So if you guys love whole hog and you're not in a place where you can get it, I would say definitely try this in your backyard. I would say one of the best things about this recipe also is if you are a barbecue person, you probably have a lot of these ingredients at home. And the last thing that I want to mention before I end this video is that going forward in this year, something that I want to do is to create a better community for people who watch my videos. I know there are some people that tag me on Instagram because that's the thing that you're most familiar with, and continue to do so. But you know, reading through comments and having people kind of go back and forth in the comment section can be a little bit difficult. So if you guys want to be part of a, you know, closer knit barbecue community, at least through my videos and the content that I make, I made a Facebook profile just for Knox Out Barbecue. I wanted to create that specifically for people who watch my videos, and my hopes is as we continue to do that, and it'll help me to know what you guys are looking for. It'll help me make better videos. But in the hopes that eventually, as we kind of move forward, I want to make more more exclusive content for you guys, but I would really like to gather a little bit more information about you guys as individuals from there first. So if you guys are interested in following that Facebook page, I'll leave a link in the description down below for you guys to check out, as well as an affiliate link to SNS. So if you guys are looking for a kettle grill that can be used as a smoker and a grill, and you're just looking for a place to kind of have all your cooking done in a small footprint, I would highly recommend it, and definitely check out their website to see if there's anything you might be interested in. So that's gonna be it for us today, guys. I appreciate you guys dropping in and watching this video, and make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one.